This clip is brought to you by VegasWinners.com. Get expert sports betting advice from some of the best handicappers in the world. Head on over to VegasWinners.com and win yourself some money.
In hindsight, do you remember how the conversation to involve a gun first came to be part of all this?
I think Steve and Brian had a lot to do with the mechanics of this angle. And I'm sure that the gun came up, Austin's a gun guy anyway, hunter and all that stuff. I'm not so sure about Brian's gun love, but I'm sure that those guys had a whole lot to do with it. And probably if they introduced the gun to Vince as an idea, Vince is going to be hard pressed to say, because he kind of liked that sensationalistic stuff. He wanted the show to be more of a dramatic, episodic presentation, a step away from the traditional pro wrestling. And so that's what you got on the show. It was not traditional pro wrestling, but it was a dramatic performance involving pro wrestlers. And I think that's what Vince that's what he was seeking all along, and wanted to expand the roles of the characters so they could do more than just a headlock or a stunner or whatever. So it was, I'm sure Austin and Brian had much to say about the input of the angle, because that was their deal between the two of them. So I don't know to what degree, but knowing those guys as I do, and I did, Connie, I think that I would be remiss to say, oh, they didn't have anything to do with it. Because I didn't like the gun doesn't mean it's not a good idea. Again, folks may love it, but I knew that those two guys, they're going to work together. They're going to collaborate. And I think that's what they did here on this angle.
It's around this time that you start to move into more of a talent relations role with JJ Dillon moving on down to Atlanta. I'm curious from a Pillman standpoint, how on top of this were you with him in terms of having conversations about where he was with his recovery, and obviously the bad news that it's not as far along as we would have liked. And then we turn that into an angle. Would that have been something that would have primarily happened with JJ before you got the spot, or is this something that's going to land on your watch?
Probably not JJ. I mean, JJ did a great job there, and I learned a lot from JJ in that role when he abruptly left. I told that story. Bruce and I were in Johannesburg, South Africa, and it was the weekend of Shane McMahon's wedding, and JJ bolted, and all because right before that we'd all taken drastic pay cuts. Business was not great, and the people that suffered first were the wrestling people. So I don't, my pay got cut like 50 grand or something. So it's significant. But I'll never forget Vince saying, if you stick with me, I'll make this all up to you. And he did. And in the form of stock and pay increases. But we just had to get the business up. We had to be more productive as a unit in the wrestling side. So it was, I talked to Brian probably multiple times a week. And normally it was him calling me. He just was bored and he was concerned. And Brian internalized a lot of stuff. Brian's a very bright guy, high IQ. And sometimes he used that high IQ in a negative way about, what am I going to do? And one of my roles was I wanted Brian to be Jesse Ventura, a Roddy Piper, a heel broadcaster that understood the business, that could be timely and creative and add a little pop culture here, there, and yon. And because Brian was very well read and up on that kind of stuff. So that was basically the thing. It was basically talking him off the ledge, which is an ongoing process.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can't believe this is real, but we not only got a handicapper, but we got the best ever. How are you so good at handicapping these games? I mean, 4-0, that's quite a streak already.
Let's talk about every pick I've given this year in the NFL as an example. 23-8. Every pick I've given this year. 4 weeks in the bag, 23-8. There's nobody in the country that can match what I do, but I always make sure, because anybody, Conrad, could make up anything. They could tell you and blow smoke and tell you, oh, I'm the greatest. But I am independently monitored and documented, so nobody could ever question what I say and go, I don't believe it. I send every pick to an independent monitoring and documentation service that has to get the pick before the game goes off and then publishes it after the game goes off so anybody can see what I gave. But this is the best start I've ever had. I've never been this good to start a season. You don't win every week, 4 weeks in a row, everything you put out. It's been the kind of year I've had. So get on a hot streak, because when a guy's on a hot streak like me, you want to ride it. I've always had a talent for picking winners. Never quite as hot as I am right now, but I've always been very good at it. And I think it's because I do more homework than anybody else. You know, the average guy or gal watching this podcast, they don't have time. They have a career, they have jobs. They might read the newspaper or go online and see something, but they don't have time 80 hours a week to study the games. That's what I do. And I have a crew of guys behind me, my consultants, who every week we get together 3 times a week, and they throw their ideas at me. I throw my ideas at them. And then I pick the final 5 plays on Saturday and Sunday in college and pro football. So, I mean, I've got a great team behind me too, but we're all doing together hundreds of hours of homework. So you don't have to. It's all at vegaswinners.com.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to vegaswinners.com right now. Let's win some money. Back to Pillman's house.
In Cincinnati with Brian Pillman, along with Kevin Kelly. And of course, everyone knows of the injury sustained at the WWF Superstars about a week ago. And Kevin, would you proceed with the interview?
Yes, Vince, it's a very tense scene here in suburban Cincinnati tonight. Brian, I have to ask you, after the unprovoked savage attack last week on WWF Superstars, you had, I understand, reconstructive surgery once again on your ankle. Can you give us the prognosis? What have the doctors told you about your recovery?
Look, Kelly, I'm alive and I got an excellent prognosis for 97. Let's talk about Mr. Austin's prognosis. I've been in bitter feuds many times in this sport. There's a fine line between business and private lives. Austin, you've crossed that line. You've made this personal. And now we're operating on a whole different set of rules, son.
And Brian, we heard earlier that Stone Cold Steve Austin could be on his way to your home here tonight. You
Actually,
can't move.
Kev, if I can interject this, I'm told that, in fact, that we have Mr. Austin circling the neighborhood. And I just wonder whether or not, from your standpoint, Mr. Pillman, if you can hear me, it seems to me that considering your vulnerability with your wife, Melanie, and
well, Steve Austin's very vulnerable as well.
do you
his
feel
rage has blinded him to the fact that his best friend knows him better than anybody.
Do you feel it?
His strengths, his weaknesses, and certainly his fears.
Notwithstanding your bravado, do you feel a hostage? You feel like you're a hostage in your own home tonight?
Steve is a dead man walking, because when Austin 316 meets Pillman,
Oh my God.
$9mm
Oh my God.
I'm gonna blast his service straight to hell.
Steve Austin's out there now, man.
What?
The line about Austin 316 meeting Pillman 9mm. That's probably not, I mean, do you think that's scripted, or is that just the guys freestyling?
Oh, I think everything they did was freestyling.
Mm. The build for this, as a reminder, this week we're watching got a 2.3, Nitro got a 3.4. The next week Nitro was up to a 3.7, but so was Raw. It was up to a 2.5. The following week Nitro was down to a 3.2, Raw's down to a 2.4. And then on the 25th, to round out the month of November, Raw logs a 2.1 and WCW would put in a 3.1. And the ratings war continues, and Nitro continues their winning streak. Pillman, Stone Cold, and the Gun, not enough to break the momentum. Let's do a couple of quick questions, and then we'll wrap this one up, talk a little bit about next week. Adam wants to know, were there ever discussions of using Melanie Pillman in more than just this angle? I asked because of Sonny, Sable, Terry, Trish, etc. It felt like Melanie could have fit into a role at the time.
I think the issue there was reliability, just worrying about where her head was. You know, Melanie had issues, as we know, we've been discussed. Dark Side of the Ring has covered that with the Brian Pillman episode back in the day. So I don't think there's anything serious there, Conrad. When Brian, I can't remember, we did an interview, was it when Brian passed away, that we had Melanie on, and that didn't go.
No.
So I don't think there's any serious consideration to answer this individual's question.
I don't think it didn't go well because of her, though. It was just probably a poor choice on Vince's part. But I, for one, am glad she didn't get into wrestling. Not because I don't think she deserved it, but I know there were little kids at home. You know, they're trying to raise a family, and It's probably hard with mom and dad on the road at the same time, especially in that crazy schedule back then. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at savewithconrad.com.